All right, I'm so excited to introduce to you our next Limitless speaker, Patti Keating. And Patti is a business coach and mindset mentor for purpose-driven entrepreneurs. And I had a really cool opportunity to work with Patti. Gosh, it had to have been last year at this point in the game, to really help me identify, some values and what felt really important to me in like my reinvention from like the business and sales world to launching Be in the Room. And even though I'd been in business for a long time, even though I feel pretty secure in myself and who I am as a human, I still found my experience with Patti really enlightening and interesting about like, what are my values and how do I make sure my personal values are really aligned within my business or with your career, right? So that is why I knew that Patti had to come speak at the event. So Patti, thank you so much.
Of course, it was a pleasure working with you. I loved uncovering everything.
It was super fun. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about just an intro to Patti, who you are, what you do?
Absolutely. Well, I'm Patti Keating, and I started my business 19 years ago this next month. I can't believe it. And, I've always been an entrepreneur from the time I was 9 years old and started Patti's Pumpkins, right? It was my first business and it sold out immediately. And I had this aha moment that you could have something of value that you love, because I loved to garden as a little girl. I grew up in the country. And you could have that and you could share it in the world and people would pay you. And I was so happy. And I just never looked back. I had business after business after business after business that supported the lifestyle that I was living. When I was engaged to a golf pro, I created a company called On the Ball Golf. I sold promotional items and I went on tour with him in Australia and sold them at the pro shops. So those kind of beliefs are ingrained in me. It's who I am, that you can design a life you love, whether you're an employee or in corporate America, right? You get to choose, but in order to choose and not be overwhelmed with all the, outside influence, we really have to know who we are. So one of the things I teach and that you experienced firsthand is understanding what I call your E code. And that is the code that is your unique code. That what are you designed to do in the world? What are you here to do? What lights you up? And how do you use it in the day-to-day operations of your life and business?
Yeah. And it's so good because what I think you said to me that was really interesting at the time that we were chatting was we don't even realize sometimes when we've strayed away from our values, because I remember when we first started talking and I was like, values, I know my values, right? Like I know who I am, but our values change. And oftentimes we find ourselves sucked into what we think our values should be, or maybe what they were, a couple of years ago, and things really change. And that was important to me, that I was like, oh shit, right? Like, have I changed that much? So can you talk about like what that journey is for someone as they reinvent and kind of figure out who they are?
Absolutely. Anytime you're not honoring your core values, you're going to feel frustrated, stuck, confused, like something's not right here. And it's just that you haven't gone deep enough. So yeah, there's, values, it's kind of a ho-hum subject until you go deep. And when you go deep and realize that every decision you're making, positive and negative, is being driven by your value system. So, they shift and change, because sometimes we'll find ourselves in a situation where maybe we aren't honoring our values. And then we start feeling, maybe projecting, it's the job, it's the client, it's whatever. But the truth of the matter is, it's you not taking the time to filter through and say yes to the things that are going to help you move forward and no to the things that are going to hold you back. And so it's really a game of self-awareness. And once you have this, what I call your filter, and you use it on a daily basis and you make decisions that might seem insane to other people, but honor who you are, life gets pretty easy.
Yeah. But that can feel terrifying for somebody who's listening to it right now. They're like, holy shit, right? Like, what is then going to have to change in my life, in my business, in my career to honor those values? How do you help people handle that fear of like,
yes, exactly. Well, that's such a great, what's that?
I said, I feel you, but I'm terrified. How do you handle that?
Yes. And that's such a great question, because, we're kind of taught in our culture to, especially as women, to, kind of fit in and work together and, don't really get too far ahead of everyone else. If you are, you're the B word. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of beliefs and customs in our culture that contribute to not really owning our personal power. And that's what knowing your values is. So it can be terrifying, because when you know that and you stand for them and you learn to honor them, you're not going to necessarily fit in. In fact, you're going to start to stand out. And guess who gets the promotion? Guess who gets the client? Guess who gets the, the exposure? It's the person that's willing to take a stand for something. And when you take a stand and you're standing for what your values are, and you're contributing to the world in your unique way that only you can do, then it is scary. It's scary at first. And so, just take baby steps, just start knowing what they are and start measuring them. Like one of the processes I have clients do during the E-Code, or after we've done the value system, the C stands for core values, is to do an assessment on a scale of 1 to 10. How well am I honoring my top 3 to 5 values? Yeah. And if it's low, if it's a 3, what needs to shift? And sometimes it's just an honest conversation. Sometimes it's a complete, maybe a career change or a business change. But once you do it, it's well worth it. So, getting through the fear and knowing that, one of my favorite sayings, and I have this on my refrigerator, I've had it for a decade or more, is you always know. And I believe that profusely. You always know. Do you listen? And are you aware enough about what you know to allow yourself to believe it? Right. So once you start taking that level of responsibility in your life, in your decisions, it's not scary anymore. It's like you realize how powerful you really are, and that you don't have to be accepted by everyone, that you don't have to live life on somebody else's terms, that you are here to be uniquely you. And in fact, that's the best way that you could ever be. And that's the most productive, the most satisfying, the most fulfilling way, is to share who you are in the world, because people need you. They need you to be you, not them, or not your mom's opinion of you, right? But you.
Yeah. And for women, I think that's so challenging, because like you said, we're conditioned. I mean, as a society, we're conditioned, right? I definitely think that men have a different set of standards enforced upon them. But, for women, depending on how old you are, right? Like you live in the world of like little girls and the good girl, like grew up in the good girl era, be a good girl, right? And you're like, who the hell am I? For real. So you had mentioned some things earlier, some things that indicate that you're not in values alignment, right? You used words like frustrated or overwhelmed. How does somebody know that they have a values problem, and not just what they think is a true business problem or a career problem, or maybe my boss is just a jerk or whatever? Like, what's the difference between I'm in an interesting situation that something needs to change and my values are out of alignment? How do you identify?
Yeah. Well, you look at all those pieces, because it's most likely a combination.
Sure.
Right. It's not necessarily one thing. Mm-hmm. When you know your values, when you know what you stand for, those conflicts and those, is it my boss? Is it my career? Questions can become clear. They can become really clear. So I'll use myself as an example. When I was in my maybe mid 20s, early 30s, I had job offers all the time. People would meet me and they'd say, I would love for you to go to real estate school and come join my brokerage. I would love for you to work for my company. And I didn't understand why I would get right up to the edge and then go, no, it's a no. And, my family, my friends were like, what is wrong with you? That was $120,000 job that you just said no to. What are you doing, Patti? I was like, I don't know, right? because I didn't understand. And then when I went through this deep learning, when I enrolled in coaching schools, when all this happened, and I understood my values, and I hear this in my clients all the time, like, oh my gosh, everything makes sense. Mm-hmm. And here's what it was for me. My number one core value, number 1 and 2, are freedom and self-expression. Mm-hmm. And so if my kids had a field trip, I wasn't going to go to work. I was going to the field trip.
Right.
And so I was threatened. You might feel threatened. You might feel stuck, like, oh, I'm trapped, right? So with a strong freedom value, my freedom value goes crazy if I get stuck in traffic. I feel trapped. Right. I feel frustrated, like what I should never have driven between 3 and 5, right? Like that was the one part of COVID I loved. I was like, yeah, I can drive anytime. So notice that. And then once you know that, when you're in a conflict or, somebody else, because we all have different value sets.
Of course.
It's somebody else is maybe coming at you, or there's a conflict, or there's a problem at work or in your business, then you can pull in and say, what do I really stand for? So I know I stand for freedom and self-expression. I'm here to help people create freedom and express who they are in the world. That's what I'm doing right now in this talk.
Right.
And so if I'm in a conflict, I can ease up and go, I'm going to let this person have the freedom to express who they are. Right. And I'm going to hold space for that. And I'm going to just be here. And it doesn't mean, because I'm listening, because I'm being polite, it doesn't mean I'm agreeing. Right. Yeah. And so now how do I, what is my come from when in response to this?
Right.
And it can calm you, because we get into, when we're out of alignment, we get into kind of fight or flight mode, and we either want to fight or we want to run. And it's like, no, I can sit with this and be safe and secure in my value system, and let the other person be, unless you're being threatened physically or emotionally, right? But in a less harmful way, you can sit there and you can work through it. You can be in it, and it's okay. And that's powerful, because you're owning your personal power, right? You're owning your personal power in any conflict, and you're not letting the circumstances take you out of the game.
Yeah. And there's so much power in that, right? Like when we can pull the power back and let everybody else do whatever it is that they want to do and not react. It takes a hell of a lot of practice, but there's a lot of power.
It does. It takes a little practice. But, and it's not, I don't know that you ever master it.
Right. It's true. Right. Again, you're either growing or dying, right? Who says that?
Exactly.
But it's true, you're always growing. There's always new challenges. You tackle one relationship, and then you have a 3.5-year-old who's mouthy and all the other things. And then, you got to relearn it all over again. So no, I totally get that. So when it comes to that feeling, right, that discomfort where your values are being challenged, when we think of, I'm thinking more like on the business owner side of this.
Yep.
Is that typically a symptom of possibly following a blueprint or a strategy or something that isn't in alignment? Or could it be more along the lines like the business isn't in alignment? Because there's somebody listening to this right now and they're like, oh shit, every time I sit down to do client work, I get this weird feeling in my body and I feel like I'm doing the wrong thing. And my business feels weird or hard or heavy. Is it the business that needs to be reshifted, or oftentimes is it, or could it possibly be that there was something in the way that they're running their business or something that's out of alignment, or could it be both?
Absolutely. And the C in the E code is just the first letter. And so let me just give you a little bit more of this package that I call the E code. And that is, the O is the opportunities. Like, what experience do you have? What opportunities are in front of you? And then we look at D, which is your destiny. And that's all about your life purpose, what you're here to do. And then the E is your energy. And we use the Enneagram for that. So if you're in your business and you're feeling, conflict or, questioning, is this really right for me? We want to look at these other components as well. We want to look at, when do I feel most on purpose? What am I really here to do? Like, what lights me up? And is this doing that, is one question. The other question is, how do I express myself? And so in the Enneagram, for instance, there's what's called the challenger. The 8 is the challenger. And so if I'm in a business serving clients, I'm going to do best to challenge them in a loving way, or in whatever, however, like for me, I'm an 8 with a 7 wing, which is the enthusiast. So I enthusiastically challenge people. I have a blast doing it. They have a blast. We're growing. Like, I love personal growth. That's all because I understand my personality style. I understand my values are freedom and self-expression. I understand my purpose is to help people create, the practical application of their gifts in the world. So I know myself so well that then I can be able to say, the reason that I'm having trouble with this particular client is, like for me, one thing that I might bump into, I think fast, I talk fast, I walk fast, and I drive fast. So if I'm with a client that wants to process a lot, it's not a good fit. Right. Yeah. So I know that about myself. I want to get them expressing themselves, creating freedom in their life, right? Like that's just,
Right. Yeah.
I know all these components of me. So now I can vet my clients at a higher level and not find myself trapped. Or for instance, maybe you're not delegating. Maybe you're in this, for me, really slow process that you're having to go through all these details. And that just doesn't suit you for your unique code. So now you know who to hire and what to delegate.
Right. And then also, exactly, because to me, I'm like, it's perfect because it not only helps you stay in your, really in your values, but it also helps you figure out who to hire. So I have a one-on-one client who I work with who's amazing. She is also an 8. And so she has learned when she interviews, like there is specific questions that she has to ask people when she grows her team, because she's a challenger. She moves fast, like exactly like you in that way. And so, it's kind of almost like a disclaimer of,
Yes.
can you handle this? Right? Like, this is how it is, but this is how I am, like, I love you. I'm just moving fast. Right. But she has learned to interview, potential team members in that way, knowing herself. So basically a long way of saying, once you really master this, get to know yourself and your values and who you really are, everything gets better, right? Your business
It makes sense. It just makes sense. Instead of being frustrated and like, why isn't this working? You can look deeper and you'll find a reason. So like, for instance, back to the Enneagram, I'm an 8 and I do really well with 2s, which are the helpers. The helpers love nothing more than to help you. And I love nothing more for them to help me. And so we just jive together, right? Like, oh, can you do this? Yeah, I'd love to do that. Right. But if I had an 8 as an assistant challenging me on, are you sure you want to write that copy like that? Right. It would just be.
It's so true. And it's so interesting. And it helps us in so many different areas of our lives to set ourselves up for success in that way. So I think that's really great. Well, Patti, thank you. And I'm so excited, and I could continue to ask you questions around this, but we want to keep these interviews, short and sweet, and just get you really excited to spend some time with Patti in April at Limitless. But the question I've been asking all of our speakers, Patti, is like, what does Limitless mean to you?
I think that question is such an important question and so powerful. I really do. I love that you're asking it. I love that you're putting on this event. I love that you're standing for limitlessness. It's so good. To me, what does it mean? What does limitless mean to me? Well, it comes right straight back down to my values, being able to express who you are as you are, doing what you most love to do, and going after the dreams of your business, your career, your family, your life, expecting the greatest outcome always, by understanding how powerful you are and understanding that when you know who you are and you trust yourself and you take action that is in alignment with your desires, with your skills, with your strengths, that's what it means to be limitless. And the sky is not even the beginning of the limit.
Right. So good. I love that so much. Because it's what we all want, right? We want the dream life. And that is basically what I just heard you describe. Like, limitless is knowing that anything that you want or need or desire is yours, or can be yours, as long as you are in alignment with who you really are and you stop trying to be somebody else.
Exactly. So just know who you are. That's the key.
Easier said than done, right, my friend? That's why you have a job.
We'll work on that at the event. Come to the event. We'll make sure you know who you are by the time you leave.
Oh my God, I have no idea who I am. Patti, where can people spend more time with you before they get the opportunity to meet you in April? Where do you hang out online?
Oh, I hang out on Facebook on my profile, Patti Keating. I have a private Facebook group called Unleashed Entrepreneurs, where I do trainings and all kinds of good things. So come check out Facebook and say hi. Let me know that you saw me here and that you're connected with Ryan. And especially if you're coming to the event, let me know. I can't wait to meet you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Patti.
You're welcome.